The scent of pine and damp earth filled my lungs as I pressed myself against the rough bark of an ancient oak, my breath coming in short, painful gasps. My head throbbed with a relentless ache that seemed to pulse behind my eyes, and when I touched my temple, my fingers came away sticky with something I didn't want to examine too closely in the dim forest light. Everything hurt. My ribs, my shoulder, the cuts that stung across my arms like tiny fires. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how I'd gotten here, and most terrifying of all, I didn't know who I was. The forest around me whispered with evening sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of night birds beginning their songs, the crack of branches that might have been deer or might have been something far more dangerous. My dress, torn and muddy, once perhaps a pale blue, clung to my shivering body. The fabric was fine, I noticed distantly, too fine for someone who should be alone in the woods. Embroidery traced the neckline, though much of it was now ruined by dirt and what looked like soot. Had there been a fire? Fragments flickered at the edges of my consciousness. The sensation of movement, rapid and jarring. Voices raised in alarm, the smell of smoke and the screaming of horses. Then impact. Violent, world-tilting impact. And after that, nothing but darkness and this waking nightmare of not knowing. I tried to stand, using the tree for support, but my legs trembled beneath me. How long had I been unconscious? The light filtering through the canopy suggested late afternoon bleeding into evening, but of which day? My stomach clenched with hunger that felt days old, and my throat was parched and raw. A sound froze me in place. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, approaching through the underbrush. "There's no point hiding," a woman's voice called out, neither kind nor cruel, simply matter of fact. "I can smell the blood from here, and you're leaving a trail a child could follow." I considered running, but my body had other ideas. Instead, I remained pressed against the oak, silent, barely breathing. A figure emerged from between the trees, a woman perhaps in her 40s, dressed in practical traveling clothes with her dark hair pulled back in a severe braid. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, found me immediately. She stopped several paces away, her posture cautious, but not threatening. "Easy," she said, raising both hands to show they were empty. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name is Vera. I live in the village about 2 miles east of here. My son found wreckage on the northern road this morning. A carriage, overturned and burned. We've been searching for survivors all day." Carriage. The word resonated with those fragmentary memories. Movement. Voices. Impact. Was I... My voice came out as barely a rasp. I swallowed painfully and tried again. Was I in that carriage? Vera's expression shifted to something like sympathy. "Based on where we found you and the state you're in, I'd say that's a fair assumption. Can you tell me your name?" I opened my mouth, reaching for the answer that should have been as natural as breathing, and found only emptiness. Panic surged through me, hot and overwhelming. I can't. You can't remember." Vera's tone gentled slightly. "That blow to your head likely scrambled things. Memory often comes back, given time. Let's get you somewhere safe and warm first. Can you walk?" Safe. Warm. The word sounded like paradise, but something held me back. "The others," I said, though I didn't know why I was certain there had been others in the carriage. Were there others? Vera's face told me the answer before her words did. "We found remains. 3, maybe 4 individuals. The fire." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. There wasn't much left to identify. "I'm sorry." The grief that hit me was strange and distant. Mourning people I couldn't picture, couldn't name. But my chest ached with it nonetheless. Tears burned in my eyes, though whether they were for the dead or for my own lost self, I couldn't say. "Come," Vera said, stepping closer and offering her arm. "Night falls fast in these woods, and there are things that hunt after dark. Things worse than wolves." The way she said it made my skin prickle with instinctive fear. I pushed away from the tree and accepted her support, my legs unsteady beneath me. As we began moving through the forest, I tried to grasp at any memory, any fragment of self, but it was like trying to hold water in my cupped hands. Everything slipped away, leaving only the certainty that I was supposed to be somewhere else, with someone else. "The carriage," I said as we walked. "Was it marked? Did it have any insignia? Any way to know where it came from?" Vera was quiet for a moment. There were symbols on what remained of the doors. Looked like pack markings, but they were badly damaged. Could have been merchants, could have been nobility, could have been anyone with enough coin to hire protected transport. Pack markings. The term meant something, hovered at the edge of understanding, but I couldn't quite grasp it. The village appeared as we crested a small rise, a collection of perhaps 30 buildings clustered around a central square. Smoke rising from chimneys, warm light spilling from windows. It looked peaceful, almost idyllic, but I noticed how people moved quickly from building to building, how few lingered outside as darkness gathered, how heavy doors were barred as soon as inhabitants slipped inside. Vera led me to a modest home at the village's edge, a sturdy structure of stone and timber. Inside, warmth enveloped me from a crackling hearth. A young man, Vera's son I assumed, given the similarity in their features, looked up sharply as we entered. "You found her," he said, moving to help support my other side. "Mother, she's in bad shape. Should I fetch the healer?" "Already sent word," Vera replied, guiding me to a chair near the fire. "Finn, get her some water and something to eat. Gently. Her stomach won't handle much after what she's been through." As Finn moved to obey, I found myself staring into the flames, watching them dance and flicker. Something about fire felt important, felt dangerous. My hands trembled as I accepted the cup of water Finn offered, and I had to concentrate to keep from spilling it as I drank. "The wreckage," I said, looking at Finn. "Did you find anything else? Anything that might help me understand?" He exchanged a glance with his mother before answering. There were bags, or what was left of them. Personal effects, mostly destroyed. But there was one thing. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, placing it carefully on the table before me. It was a brooch, tarnished and bent, but still recognizable. A silver wolf mid-leap, its eyes set with small amber stones. One of them was missing, leaving an empty socket like a blind eye staring at nothing. The moment I saw it, something shifted in my chest. Recognition without understanding, importance without context. My hand moved of its own accord, reaching for it, and when my fingers closed around the cool metal, a flash of memory hit me like lightning. Strong hands fastening the brooch to my cloak. A deep voice, rough but careful. "This will keep you safe. No matter what happens, they'll know you're under my protection." "Whose protection?" I gasped, and both Vera and Finn leaned forward with concern. "What is it?" Vera asked. "Did you remember something? A voice," I whispered, clutching the brooch so tightly its broken edges bit into my palm. "Someone gave this to me. Someone who—" I struggled for the word, for the feeling that came with the memory. "Someone important." The door opened again, bringing a gust of cold evening air and an elderly woman carrying a worn leather bag. The healer, I presumed. She approached me with the confidence of someone who'd seen every injury and illness the world had to offer. "Let's have a look at you, child," she said, her weathered hands surprisingly gentle as she examined my head wound. "Nasty bump. You're lucky. A few inches to the right, and we'd be having a very different conversation. Or no conversation at all." As she worked, cleaning and bandaging my injuries with practiced efficiency, I found my gaze drawn to the window. Full dark had fallen now, and the village was quiet, shuttered tight against the night. But I could have sworn I saw movement in the shadows between buildings. Large shapes, too big to be dogs, prowling just beyond the reach of the lamplight. "What's out there?" I asked. "What hunts in these woods?" The healer's hands paused for just a moment. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. "These lands sit between territories. Wild lands, where the old laws still hold. Creatures that most folk in the civilized world have forgotten or think are just stories. They're real enough here." "Wolves?" I ventured, though the word felt inadequate. "Among other things," Vera said from where she stood by the hearth. "But the wolves are the least of it. There are older things, stranger things, and there are those who can walk as both man and beast. Shifters." The word rose unbidden from whatever dark waters my memories had sunk into. Werewolves. The pack markings Vera had mentioned on the carriage suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. I was traveling with shifters, I said. Not quite a question. The three villagers exchanged weighted glances. That would be our guess, Finn said carefully. The carriage was well made, well guarded based on the weapons we found. And there was a scent about it, even through the smoke and ash, wild and fierce, the kind that makes ordinary men nervous. But you're human, the healer added, peering at me with sharp eyes. No question about that. So the question becomes, why would a human woman be traveling under shifter protection? And more importantly, who's going to come looking for you? The thought sent ice through my veins. Would someone come looking? The memory of that voice fastening the brooch, "They'll know you're under my protection," suggested yes. But was that good or bad? Safety or danger? My absent memories offered no answers. "We'll keep you safe until you remember," Vera said, though her tone suggested this was more complicated than simple kindness. "But you need to understand, if you were traveling with a pack, and that pack was important enough to warrant that kind of protection, then your disappearance won't go unnoticed. When they come..." She trailed off, leaving the implications hanging in the air. "When they come, what?" I pressed. "When they come," the healer said bluntly, "they'll want answers. And they won't necessarily believe that you've lost your memory. They might think you ran. They might think you're hiding something. Shifters aren't known for their patience with mysteries, especially when it involves their own." I looked down at the brooch still clutched in my hand. The single remaining amber eye seemed to stare back at me, holding secrets I desperately needed to know. Who had given me this? Why had I been traveling through wild lands under shifter guard? And why did the thought of someone coming to find me fill me with equal parts terror and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope? Outside, somewhere in the darkness beyond the village walls, a wolf howled. The sound was answered by others, a chorus rising into the night sky, eerie and beautiful, and somehow mournful. The three villagers stiffened, Finn moving to check that the door was properly barred. But I found myself standing, drawn to the window, to that wild song. It called to something in me, something I couldn't name or understand. My reflection in the dark glass showed a stranger, blonde hair matted with blood and dirt, pale skin bruised and scratched, blue eyes wide with fear and confusion. But beneath the fear, something else flickered in those eyes. Recognition. The howling continued, growing closer, and I realized with a certainty that transcended memory. They weren't just hunting in these woods. They were searching. And whether I remembered or not, they would find me. 3 days passed in Vera's cottage. 3 days of frustrating blankness, punctuated by dreams I couldn't quite remember upon waking. I helped where I could, stirring pots over the fire, folding linens, simple tasks that required no memory of who I'd been before. The villagers were kind but cautious, and I noticed how conversations would stop when I entered a room, how glances were exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. On the 4th morning, I woke to find Vera already dressed, her face grave as she stared out the window at the pre-dawn darkness. "They're here," she said simply. My heart seized. "Who?" "Riders. 12 at least, maybe more. They arrived an hour ago and made camp just beyond the village boundary. They're waiting for daylight to approach properly." She turned to face me, and I saw fear there, carefully controlled but unmistakable. The village elder went out to speak with them under flag of truce. Their leader is asking about survivors from the carriage wreck. Asking about a woman. I stood on trembling legs, pulling the borrowed shawl tighter around my shoulders. "What do I do?" "That depends," Vera said. "Do you remember anything more? Anything that might tell us if these are friends or enemies?" I'd been asking myself the same question for 3 sleepless nights. The brooch sat on the small table beside the bed where I'd slept, and I'd spent hours staring at it, willing it to unlock the doors in my mind. There had been more flashes, fragmentary and incomplete. The sensation of strong arms around me. The rumble of a voice I felt more than heard. Torchlight on dark fur, but nothing concrete. Nothing that told me if I should run toward these riders or away from them. "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know who they are or what they want from me." Vera nodded, having expected this answer. "Then we'll let you decide. The elder will tell them about you. There's no hiding your presence, not from shifters. They can scent you from here, I'd wager. But we can give you the choice of whether to go to them or not. This village may be small, but we don't hand over those under our protection without consent." The word protection echoed the memory of that phantom voice. "They'll know you're under my protection, but whose protection? And did it extend beyond death?" "I want to see them," I heard myself say, from a distance, "before I decide." Vera's expression suggested this was both brave and foolish, but she nodded. "Finn can take you to the mill. It sits on higher ground. You'll have a clear view of their camp without being seen yourself. But if you're going, go now, while it's still dark enough to hide your movement." Finn was waiting outside, and together we moved silently through the sleeping village. The morning air was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of wood smoke and something else. Something wild and musky that made my pulse quicken. As we climbed the gentle slope toward the old windmill, that scent grew stronger. The mill was abandoned, its great wheel still and silent. Finn led me to an upper window, partially shuttered, that overlooked the village and the meadow beyond. In the gray pre-dawn light, I could see them. The camp was orderly, military in its precision, tents arranged in a careful formation, horses picketed nearby. Except these weren't ordinary horses. They were massive, war-bred creatures that stood calmly despite the predatory scents that must have surrounded them. And the figures moving through the camp with purposeful efficiency weren't entirely human. Even from this distance, I could sense it. The way they moved, too fluid and powerful. The way they seemed to communicate with glances and subtle gestures. These were shifters, warriors, and they'd come with a singular purpose. "There," Finn breathed, pointing toward the largest tent. A man emerged, and even across the distance, even in the dim light, he commanded attention. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a predator's grace. He wore dark traveling clothes, well-made but practical, and his hair caught what little light there was. Dark, I thought. Perhaps black, or deepest brown. He spoke to another man beside him, and even though I couldn't hear the words, I could see the deference in the other's posture. This was their leader. As I watched, he turned, scanning the village with eyes I couldn't see but somehow felt. And in that moment, something in my chest pulled tight, like a rope drawn taut between us. The sensation was so sudden, so overwhelming, that I gasped and stumbled back from the window. "What is it?" Finn caught my arm. "Are you all right?" I couldn't answer. My heart was racing, my skin flushed despite the morning chill. That feeling, that strange, inexplicable pull. What did it mean? Fear? Recognition? Something else entirely? I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to slow my breathing. I need to think, but there was no time. Even as I struggled to compose myself, a commotion rose from the village below. Voices, raised but not quite shouting. The elder must have returned from his parley. And sure enough, moments later, we saw him making his way through the waking village, heading directly for Vera's cottage. "We should go back," Finn said urgently. "They'll be looking for you." The walk back down seemed to take both an eternity and no time at all. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. What if I'd been running from these people? What if I'd done something terrible? What if they meant to punish me for surviving when others had died? But beneath the fear, that strange pull remained, a compass pointing toward the camp, toward that figure I'd glimpsed only briefly. Vera was waiting at the door, her face tight with tension. "The elders in the square, calling a gathering. They want to meet with you, the leader of the riders. He's requested an audience, promised safe conduct. It's your choice, but..." She hesitated. "Child, I think you need to hear what he has to say. Even if you don't remember, you deserve to know who you were, who I was." The phrase struck me as both hopeful and terrifying. The village square was already filling with people when we arrived, the entire population turning out to witness what would happen next. They kept a respectful distance, forming a loose circle, leaving the center open. The elder stood there, an old man with a lined face and steady eyes, and beside him, My breath caught. He was even more imposing up close. Taller than any man I'd yet seen, with a presence that seemed to fill the square despite his stillness. His features were strong, almost harsh. A sharp jaw shadowed with stubble, a straight nose that looked like it had been broken at least once. High cheekbones that spoke of aristocratic bloodlines, but it was his eyes that held me frozen. Dark, intense, and fixed on me with such focus that I felt stripped bare, as if he could see through every wall I'd built in these few days of fragmented existence. Those eyes were amber, deep, burning amber, like the remaining stone in the brooch. "You," he said, and his voice was the one from my memory. Deep, rough-edged, careful. "Thank the gods. You're alive." He took a step forward, and I instinctively took one back. Something flickered across his face, pain, quickly masked, and he stopped immediately, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Forgive me," he said, his tone shifting, becoming more formal. "I forget myself. You've been through an ordeal." He glanced at the elder, then back to me. "I am Rowan Ashford, Alpha of the Northern Reach. You were traveling under my protection when your carriage was attacked. I've been searching for you since we found the wreckage. Rowan." The name resonated, but distantly, like hearing something called from very far away. "Alpha," I repeated, testing the word. "You're a shifter. A werewolf." "Yes." His gaze never left my face, searching, assessing, as were those who were escorting you. "My people. They died protecting you, and I—" His voice roughened. "I need to know what happened, what you remember." The square had gone silent, everyone watching this exchange with barely concealed fascination and fear. I was acutely aware of Vera standing just behind me, a silent support. "I don't remember," I said, and watched his expression shift to something that might have been shock. "I don't remember anything. Not the attack. Not the journey. Not—" I swallowed hard. Not even my own name. The silence that followed was absolute. Rowan stared at me as if I'd struck him, and I saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. Saw the muscle jump in his jaw. "Nothing?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "You don't remember anything at all?" "Fragments," I admitted. "Dreams that fade when I wake, and one memory. Someone fastening a brooch to my cloak, telling me it would keep me safe, that it would show I was under protection." I reached into my pocket and withdrew the damaged piece. "This brooch. Was it you who gave it to me?" He moved then, closing the distance between us in 3 long strides, and I fought the urge to retreat again. Up close, he was overwhelming, not just in size, though he towered over me, but in presence. That wild scent I'd noticed earlier was strongest near him, pine and earth and something uniquely his own. When he reached for the brooch, his fingers brushed mine, and the contact sent a shock through my entire body. His reaction was equally visceral. I saw his pupils dilate, saw his breath catch. For a moment, we both stood frozen, connected by that small piece of damaged silver. "Yes," he said finally, his voice strained. "I gave this to you, the day you left my territory heading south. You were supposed to be under guard all the way to the capital. You were supposed to be safe." The grief in his words was palpable, and I found myself responding to it instinctively, wanting to comfort this stranger who clearly blamed himself for what had happened. "Your people died protecting me," I said softly. "The healer said there were remains. They didn't abandon me. Whatever happened, they fought. They fought," he agreed, his jaw tight. "We found evidence of that. The attackers were numerous, well-armed. There were signs of—" He glanced around at the watching villagers and seemed to reconsider his words. "Signs of dark magic. Old magic, the kind that shouldn't exist anymore. Dark magic." The word sent a chill down my spine. "Why?" I asked. "Why would anyone attack my carriage? Why was I important enough to protect with shifter guards?" Rowan's expression became guarded. "That's complicated, and perhaps not best discussed in such a public forum." He looked at the elder. "With your permission, I'd like to speak with her privately. I give you my word, my oath as Alpha, that she'll come to no harm." The elder looked to me, making it clear that the choice was mine. I studied Rowan's face, looking for any sign of deception or danger, but all I saw was intensity, concern, and something that looked dangerously like longing. "All right," I said. "But somewhere I can be seen. The mill. We can talk there." If Rowan was offended by my lack of trust, he didn't show it. He simply nodded and stepped back, allowing me to lead the way. Vera caught my arm as I passed. "We'll be watching," she murmured. "You just shout if you need help." The walk to the mill was silent, awareness crackling between us like static before a storm. I could feel him behind me, matching his stride to mine, close enough that I could hear his breathing, could feel the heat radiating from his body in the cool morning air. Inside the mill, I turned to face him, putting the old grinding stone between us like a barrier. Rowan stopped just inside the doorway, and I noticed he was careful to leave the door open, the exit clear, ensuring I didn't feel trapped. "Who am I?" I asked bluntly. "If you want me to trust you, start with that." He studied me for a long moment, and I saw conflict play across his features. Finally, he said, "Your name is Elena. Elena Winters. You're 23 years old, and you've been living in my territory for the past 8 months. Elena." I rolled the name around in my mind, waiting for recognition that didn't come. It felt no more mine than any other name might. "Why was I living in your territory?" "You came seeking sanctuary," Rowan said carefully. "You'd fled from a difficult situation. I granted you protection, gave you a place in my household." There was more to it. I could hear it in what he wasn't saying, see it in the tension of his posture. "What kind of difficult situation?" "That's your story to tell, when your memory returns." His voice was firm. "I won't violate your privacy by speaking of things you shared with me in confidence." It was a fair answer, even if it frustrated me. "And the journey south? Why was I traveling to the capital?" Something shifted in his expression. Pain, unmistakable and raw. "You were going to testify before the Council of Alphas. There's been conflict in the Shifter territories, accusations of treaty violations, threats of war. You had information that could prevent bloodshed. You volunteered to go, even knowing the danger. The weight of that settled over me. I'd been important, involved in matters of politics and war. No wonder someone had wanted to stop me." "The attack," I said. "You said there were signs of dark magic. Do you know who was responsible?" "I have suspicions," Rowan admitted. "But no proof. Not yet. That's part of why I needed to find you so desperately. You're the only witness, the only one who might remember what happened, who might have seen something that could identify our enemies." "But I don't remember." The helplessness in my own voice made me angry. "I can't help you. I can't tell you anything. You're alive." The intensity in his words startled me. "That's what matters. The rest, the memories, the testimony. None of it matters if you're not alive." He moved closer, and this time I didn't retreat. There was something in his eyes, something desperate and fierce, that held me in place. "Elena," he said, and hearing the name from his lips sent a shiver through me. "I know you don't remember, but I need you to understand something. You are under my protection. Not just because of politics or duty, but because He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "To me you matter, to my pack. And I swear to you, I will find who did this. I will make them pay for what they took from you." The vehemence in his voice, the barely controlled rage, it should have frightened me, but instead, I felt that pull again, that inexplicable connection drawing me toward him. "Take me back," I heard myself say. Rowan went very still. "What?" "To your territory. To the Northern Reach." The decision crystallized even as I spoke. "You said I lived there for 8 months. Maybe being there will help me remember. Maybe seeing familiar places, familiar faces." "It's dangerous," he said immediately. "Whoever attacked your carriage knows you survived by now. They'll be watching for you. The moment you leave this village, you become a target again." "I'm a target here too," I countered. "A stranger with no memory, no identity, no way to defend myself. At least in your territory, I'd have protection. I'd have people who know me, who could help me understand who I was." "Who you are," Rowan corrected softly, "not who you were." You're still Elena, whether you remember or not." The certainty in his voice did something to me, warmed a cold place inside that I hadn't even known existed. This man, this powerful alpha, he believed I was still myself, despite everything I'd lost. How could I not trust that? "Will you take me back?" I asked again. Rowan held my gaze for a long moment, and I saw the battle play out in those amber eyes, the desire to keep me close warring with the fear of putting me in danger. Finally, he nodded. "I'll take you back, but on one condition." "What?" "You stay close to me, at all times. No wandering off, no taking chances. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide. Can you agree to that?" It should have chafed, being ordered about, but something in me recognized the care beneath the command, the fear that drove his need for control. "I agree," I said. The relief that washed over his face was profound. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and when I didn't, his hand cupped my cheek with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his size and power. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for trusting me. I know you have no reason to, with your memories gone, but I promise you, Elena, I will keep you safe. Or I will die trying." In the doorway, backlit by the rising sun, he looked like something out of legend, a warrior king, fierce and loyal. And as I looked up at him, feeling the warmth of his hand against my skin, I thought that maybe, just maybe, some part of me did remember. Not with my mind, but with something deeper, something that recognized him as home. We left the village at midday, after Rowan had made arrangements with the elder, and I'd said my goodbyes to Vera and Finn. The family had asked for nothing in return for their kindness, but Rowan had insisted on leaving them with gold coins and a promise of protection should they ever need it. Vera had pulled me aside before we departed, pressing a small bundle into my hands. "Supplies for the journey," she'd said. "And this." She'd added a worn leather journal, its pages blank. "You may not remember who you were, but you're becoming someone new with each passing day. Perhaps writing it down will help." Now, as we rode north through forests that grew denser and wilder with each mile, I kept that journal tucked safely in my saddlebag. Rowan had given me a gentle mare, steady and calm, sensing perhaps that I couldn't recall if I'd ever ridden before. Muscle memory served me well enough. My body knew how to sit a saddle, how to move with the horse's gait, even if my mind couldn't conjure a single memory of learning. The group that surrounded us was smaller than I'd expected, only 6 others besides Rowan and myself. But each of them moved with the same predatory grace, the same barely restrained power. They were respectful, keeping their distance, but I caught them watching me when they thought I wasn't looking. Curiosity, concern, and something else I couldn't quite name. A woman with copper-red hair tied back in a practical braid rode up alongside me in the late afternoon. She was perhaps a few years older than me, with sharp green eyes and a scar that cut through her left eyebrow. "I'm Sasha," she said without preamble. "Second of the Alpha's Guard. We met before, when you first came to the Reach, though I doubt you remember." "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "I wish I could." Sasha shrugged. "Don't apologize for what wasn't your choice. The healer said head wounds are tricky things. Memory might come back in pieces, might come back all at once, might never come back at all." She paused, studying me. "How much has Rowan told you?" "Not much," I admitted. "He said I came seeking sanctuary, that I was going to testify before some council." "That's the bones of it," Sasha agreed. "But there's more. There's always more." She glanced ahead to where Rowan rode at the front of our group, his posture alert, scanning the forest around us. "He's been half mad since we found the wreckage. Didn't sleep, barely ate, just pushed us harder and harder, searching. Some of the others thought you were dead, that we were chasing a ghost. But he refused to believe it. The intensity of his reaction puzzled me. Why? If I was just someone seeking sanctuary." "You weren't just someone." Sasha's voice was quiet but firm. "Look, it's not my place to say more than that. Rowan would have my hide. But I'll tell you this much. When you disappeared, something broke in him. Something I've never seen break before. So whatever you were to him, whatever you are, it's more than just duty or obligation. Before I could press for more information, a howl split the air, sharp, urgent, a warning. The entire group reacted instantly, horses pulled to a stop, hands moving to weapons. Rowan wheeled his mount around, his eyes finding me immediately. Elena, to me. Now. I urged my mare forward, and the moment I was close enough, Rowan's hand shot out, gripping my reins. 2 of the guards flanked us, creating a protective barrier. "What is it?" I asked, trying to control the fear that spiked through me. "We're being watched," Rowan said, his voice low and controlled. "Have been for the last mile. I was hoping they'd lose interest, but it seems they've decided to make their presence known." As if summoned by his words, figures began emerging from the forest around us. Not human, or at least, not entirely. They moved on all 4s, massive wolves with eyes that gleamed with too much intelligence, too much malice, but these weren't ordinary wolves. Their proportions were wrong, too large, too muscular, and their fur seemed to shimmer with an oily, unnatural sheen. "Twisted ones," Sasha breathed, and I heard the horror in her voice. "I thought they were just rumors." "They're real enough," Rowan said grimly. He raised his voice, addressing the circle of creatures surrounding us. "We have no quarrel with you. Let us pass, and there need be no bloodshed." One of the creatures, larger than the others, with fur that seemed to shift between black and sickly green, threw back its head and laughed. The sound was wrong, distorted, like gravel scraping against glass. When it spoke, its voice was equally twisted, words formed by a mouth not meant for human speech. "The Alpha of the Northern Reach," it rasped. "How far you've fallen, begging for passage through the wild lands. And what's this?" Its malformed snout swung toward me. "A little human pet? How interesting." Rowan's entire body went rigid. "Touch her, and I'll tear out your throat." "Such protectiveness," the creature mocked. "One might almost think she's important, perhaps important enough to be worth a reward from those who seek her." My blood ran cold. They knew. Somehow they knew who I was, or at least that I was valuable. "Last warning," Rowan said, and his voice had dropped to something barely human, resonant with the beast beneath his skin. "Leave. Now." The creature's response was to lunge. What followed happened too fast for my mind to fully process. Rowan vaulted from his horse, his body shifting mid-leap, clothes tearing as fur erupted across his skin, bones reshaping with sickening cracks that somehow sounded right. He hit the ground as a wolf, but not like the twisted creatures. He was larger. His fur the deep black-brown I'd glimpsed in the pre-dawn light, his eyes blazing amber, beautiful and terrible all at once. The clearing erupted into chaos. Rowan's guards shifted as well, engaging the twisted ones, and the forest filled with snarls and the clash of bodies. Sasha remained human, her blade flashing as she cut down any creature that got too close to where I sat, frozen on my terrified horse. "Don't watch!" she shouted at me. "Keep your eyes on the trees! Watch for more coming!" But I couldn't look away from Rowan. He fought with a savage grace, every movement economical and lethal. The leader of the twisted ones was nearly his size, but Rowan was faster, smarter, driven by a fury that was almost palpable. They came together in a collision of fangs and claws, and I saw blood, dark and wrong from the twisted one, crimson and painfully real from Rowan. He was hurt. Something inside me snapped. Without thinking, without planning, I found myself sliding from the horse. Sasha cursed and tried to grab me, but I was already moving, running toward where Rowan and the creature rolled and fought, locked together. "Rowan!" I screamed his name, and for just an instant, both wolves froze. That instant was enough. Rowan's jaws found the creature's throat, and he tore it out with brutal efficiency. The twisted one collapsed, its body already beginning to dissolve into something that looked like oil and ash. Around us, the remaining creatures broke and fled, their leader's death breaking whatever hold had driven them to attack. Rowan shifted back to human form, and I realized distantly that I should probably look away. He was naked, covered in blood and dirt, but I couldn't. He stood there, chest heaving, looking at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. I told you to stay with the horses, he said, his voice rough. You were hurt, I said, then felt foolish because of course he was hurt. He'd just been in a fight for his life. I've had worse. But even as he spoke, I could see the deep gashes across his ribs, still bleeding. One of the guards approached with clothes, and Rowan dressed quickly, though I noticed he winced when the fabric touched his wounds. We need to keep moving, Sasha said urgently. Those things will regroup or bring reinforcements. And Rowan, you need treatment before those wounds fester. Whatever corrupted those shifters, their claws carry poison. There's a way station 3 miles north, Rowan said, already moving toward his horse. We can make it before dark if we push. We rode hard, and I noticed that Rowan was struggling to stay upright in his saddle, despite his attempts to hide it. Twice I saw him sway, catching himself at the last moment. Sasha noticed too, moving her horse closer to his, ready to steady him if needed. The way station turned out to be a fortified lodge built into the side of a hill, half stone and half living rock. Rowan nearly fell getting off his horse, and it took 2 guards to help him inside while the others secured the perimeter. The interior was sparse but clean, a common room with a large hearth, several smaller chambers branching off. Sasha directed the guards to lay Rowan on a bench near the fire, and I found myself pushing forward, kneeling beside him. Let me see, I said, my hands already moving to his shirt. Elena. He started to protest, but I cut him off. I don't care about propriety right now. You're hurt because you were protecting me. Let me help. Something in my voice must have convinced him, because he nodded and let me ease the shirt away from his wounds. They were worse than I'd thought. Deep gouges that oozed blood that looked too dark, the flesh around them already showing signs of infection. There's a medical kit in my pack, Sasha said, appearing at my shoulder with a leather bag. But I'll be honest. I've treated normal wounds, not poison from twisted ones. We need a healer, preferably one who knows dark magic. The Reach has healers, Rowan said through gritted teeth. We're still a day's ride away, maybe less if we push through the night. You're not riding anywhere, I said firmly, surprising myself with the authority in my voice. Not until we've cleaned these wounds and you've rested. Elena's right, Sasha agreed. You'll just make it worse. Might not even make it to the Reach if you push yourself now. I could see Rowan wanted to argue, but another wave of pain crossed his face and he sagged back against the bench. Fine, he conceded. A few hours. Then we move. Sasha showed me what was in the medical kit. Bandages, herbs I didn't recognize, a bottle of clear liquid that smelled like it would strip paint. This will hurt, she warned, handing me a cloth. A lot. I looked at Rowan, saw him watching me with those intense amber eyes. I'm sorry, I said softly. Don't be. His hand found mine, squeezed gently. I've endured worse, and at least this time I have something worth looking at while I suffer. The attempt at humor made me smile despite everything. I squeezed his hand back, then released it, and began cleaning the wounds. Rowan barely flinched, though I could see the muscles in his jaw working, could feel the tension radiating through his body. His control was impressive and terrible. He wouldn't show weakness, wouldn't allow himself to react, even though I could see the pain in his eyes. Talk to me, I said as I worked. Distract yourself. Tell me about the Northern Reach. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then slowly, he began to speak. It's beautiful, he said, his voice strained but steady, especially now, heading into winter. The mountains turn white first, then the forests. There's a lake at the heart of my territory, Mirror Lake, we call it. When it freezes, you can see straight through to the bottom, like looking through glass. His eyes grew distant, lost in memory. You used to sit by that lake. Said it helped you think, helped you feel peaceful. I did? The image he painted felt both foreign and somehow right, almost every day, Rowan continued. You'd bundle up against the cold and take a book down to the shore. Sometimes you'd read, sometimes you'd just sit and watch the water. He paused, seeming to catch himself. I'd often join you. We'd talk about everything and nothing, politics and poetry, pack law and human philosophy. You challenged me in ways I'd never been challenged before. There was something in his voice, a warmth and longing that made my hands still in their work. Rowan, I said carefully, what was I to you? Really? He met my eyes, and for a long moment, the world seemed to contract to just the two of us. The answer was there in his gaze, raw and undeniable, but he didn't speak it aloud. You were important, he said finally. You are important. That's all that matters right now. But I could hear what he wasn't saying, could see it in every line of his body, every careful word. And that strange pull I'd felt since first seeing him made sudden, perfect sense. Before I could question him further, one of the guards burst through the door, breathing hard. Alpha, he said urgently. We have a problem. There are riders approaching from the south, at least 20 of them moving fast, and they're flying council colors. Rowan sat up too quickly, swaying with the sudden movement. The council? This far north? He cursed softly. They must have heard about the attack, about Elena being found. Is that bad? I asked, though the tension in the room suggested I already knew the answer. It's complicated, Rowan said, already moving toward the window despite his injuries. The council has jurisdiction over interpact disputes, but they also have their own agendas. And if they take you into their custody, claiming it's for your own protection. He turned to look at me, his expression grim. I won't be able to protect you anymore. Then what do we do? Rowan was silent for a moment, clearly weighing options. Finally, he said, We trust each other. You said you'd stay close to me, do what I say if danger came. Do you still agree to that? I thought about everything that had happened. The attack by the Twisted Ones, the care with which Rowan and his people had protected me, the way my very soul seemed to recognize this man even when my mind could not. I trust you, I said, and meant it. The look he gave me then was worth every uncertainty, every fear. Then we're going to make a stand, he said. The council wants to question you. They can do it here, with me present. I won't let them take you. Outside, the sound of approaching horses grew louder. Through the window, I could see them now, riders in formal uniforms, carrying banners that bore symbols I didn't recognize. At their head rode a woman with silver hair and eyes that gleamed even in the fading daylight. She looked powerful, she looked dangerous, and she was looking directly at the way station, directly at us, with an expression that promised nothing good. The silver-haired woman dismounted with fluid grace, her eyes never leaving the way station entrance. She moved like someone accustomed to command, to having her presence alone demand respect. Behind her, the council riders formed a precise semicircle, hands resting on weapons but not yet drawn, a show of force dressed up as diplomacy. Rowan stepped out to meet her, and I noticed he'd pulled on a formal coat despite his injuries, presenting himself as alpha rather than wounded warrior. I stayed just inside the doorway as he'd instructed, close enough to hear but sheltered from direct confrontation. Counselor Thorne, Rowan said, his voice carrying across the clearing. This is unexpected. The Northern Reach received no notice of a council delegation. The woman, Thorne, smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. A regrettable oversight, Alpha Ashford. But given the circumstances, I'm sure you'll understand the urgency. We received word of an attack on one of your caravans. An attack that resulted in multiple casualties and the disappearance of a very important witness. The witness has been found, Rowan said carefully. She's under my protection and will be escorted safely to my territory to recover. Recover from what exactly? Thorne's gaze shifted, finding me in the doorway. Step forward, girl. Let me see you. I hesitated, but Rowan gave me a slight nod. I moved to stand beside him, very aware of Thorne's scrutiny as her eyes traveled over me, assessing, calculating. Elena Winters, Thorne said. I'm relieved to see you alive. When we heard about the attack, we feared the worst. The council has been most anxious about your safety. There was something in her tone that set my teeth on edge, a falseness beneath the concern. The council's worry is appreciated, I said, keeping my voice level. But as Alpha Ashford said, I'm recovering. Once I'm well enough, I'll be happy to provide whatever testimony the council requires. That's just it, my dear, Thorne said, and now her smile sharpened. The council isn't certain waiting is the wisest course. The attack on your caravan suggests someone very much wants to prevent your testimony. Remaining with Alpha Ashford might put you in continued danger. Are you suggesting, Rowan said, his voice dropping dangerously low, that I'm incapable of protecting those under my care? Not incapable, Thorn replied smoothly, simply that you may be compromised. After all, the witness's testimony directly concerns your territory, your decisions. Some might say you have a vested interest in ensuring that testimony never reaches the council. The accusation hung in the air like poison. I saw Rowan's hands clench into fists, saw the rage flicker across his face before he controlled it. You accuse me of conspiring to silence a witness. Each word was precisely enunciated, vibrating with barely restrained fury. Of attacking my own people? I accuse you of nothing, Thorn said. I merely point out the appearance of impropriety, which is why the council believes it would be best if Miss Winters traveled with us. For her protection, and to ensure the integrity of her eventual testimony. No. The word was out of my mouth before I'd consciously decided to speak. Both Rowan and Thorn turned to look at me. I appreciate the council's concern, but I'm staying with Alpha Ashford. Thorn's expression hardened. I don't think you understand the situation, child. This isn't a request. Then it's a kidnapping, I said, surprising myself with my boldness. I'm a free woman, not a prisoner. I choose to remain under Alpha Ashford's protection. A choice you're making without full knowledge of the facts, Thorn countered. She took a step closer, her voice lowering to something almost sympathetic. My dear, I understand you've suffered a head injury, that your memories are unreliable, but that's precisely why you need the council's protection. In your current state, you're vulnerable to manipulation, to being influenced by those who might not have your best interests at heart. The implication was clear. She thought Rowan was manipulating me, using my memory loss to control what I might eventually testify. My memories may be gone, I said, but my judgment isn't. I trust Alpha Ashford. I don't trust you. The clearing went silent. Sasha made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Thorn's face went very still, very cold. I see, she said finally. Then perhaps we should discuss this more candidly. She looked at Rowan. Alpha Ashford, would you care to tell Miss Winters why she was really traveling to the council? What she was going to testify about? Rowan's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away from Thorn. That's her information to share when she's ready. Or perhaps you'd prefer she never remember, Thorn suggested. How convenient for you that she's lost her memory. No testimony, no consequences. What consequences? I demanded, looking between them. What was I going to testify about? Thorn's smile was triumphant. About Alpha Ashford's violations of the Treaty of Borders, about how he's been harboring refugees from other territories without proper documentation or approval, about how he's been building an army under the guise of protection, about how he's been... Enough. Rowan's voice cracked like a whip. You twist truth into lies with every breath, Thorn. Yes. I've given sanctuary to those fleeing persecution. Yes, I've strengthened my forces, because threats like Twisted Ones and Council overreach make it necessary. And yes, Elena was going to testify about all of it. But she was also going to testify about why these actions were necessary, about the corruption in the Council itself. Thorn's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Careful, Alpha. Accusations of corruption are serious matters. As are attacks on caravans carrying witnesses, Rowan shot back. Tell me, Counselor, where were you 3 days ago when Elena's guards were being slaughtered? The tension ratcheted up another notch. Thorn's hand moved toward her weapon, and instantly Rowan's guards shifted, ready to defend their Alpha. The Council riders mirrored the movement. We were seconds away from bloodshed. Stop, I said, stepping between them. It was probably foolish, probably suicidal, but I couldn't watch this escalate into violence. Please, just stop. I turned to Thorn. I don't remember what I was going to testify. I don't remember the politics or the accusations or any of it, but I do remember one thing. When those Twisted Ones attacked us today, Alpha Ashford nearly died protecting me. Not because I'm a useful witness, but because he gave his word to keep me safe. That means something to me, even without my memories. I looked back at Rowan, saw something like pride and pain warring in his expression. Then I addressed both of them. I'll make you a deal. Give me time. 1 week in the Northern Reach to recover, to try to regain my memories. At the end of that week, I'll come willingly to the council to provide whatever testimony I can, whether my memories have returned or not, and I'll do it truthfully, regardless of who it helps or hurts. Elena, Rowan started, but I shook my head. It's fair, I said, and it's my choice. Thorne considered this, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. 1 week. But I'll be stationing council observers near the Northern Reach. If I suspect any attempt to flee or any interference with the witness's recovery, I'll invoke the council's authority to take her into custody immediately. Agreed? Rowan looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he gave a curt nod. Agreed. Thorne remounted her horse, her riders following suit. Before leaving, she looked down at me one last time. I hope you know what you're doing, Miss Winters. Trust is a dangerous thing to give freely, especially to those with the most to lose from your honesty. Then they were gone, riding south into the gathering dusk, leaving us standing in the clearing with the weight of the agreement settling over us. The moment they were out of sight, Rowan swayed. I caught his arm, feeling the tremor running through him. The confrontation had cost him more than he'd shown. Inside, Sasha ordered, already moving to support Rowan's other side. Now. Before you collapse, and we have to carry you. We got him back to the bench by the fire, and I resumed treating his wounds, while Sasha prepared a sleeping draught from the medical supplies. The poison had spread further. I could see dark veins tracking away from the gouges, could feel the heat of fever building in his skin. You shouldn't have bargained with her, Rowan said, his voice rough with pain and something else. 1 week isn't enough time to recover your memories. You've committed yourself to testifying without knowing what you'll say. I committed to telling the truth. I corrected, applying fresh bandages. Whatever that truth turns out to be. Can you live with that? He caught my hand, stilling my movements. His eyes, fever bright but clear, held mine. I can live with anything as long as you're alive and safe. What I can't live with is the thought that I've put you in danger again. The danger was already there, I said softly. You didn't create it, and you've done nothing but try to protect me from it. Elena. He pulled me closer, his other hand coming up to cup my face with a gentleness that belied his strength. There are things I need to tell you. Things about who you were to me, about what we were to each other, but I don't want to influence your choices. Don't want you to feel obligated by feelings you don't remember. My heart was pounding. That pull, that connection, was so strong now it was almost painful. Tell me anyway. He searched my face and I saw the moment he made his decision. You were more than just someone under my protection. You are, my mate. Not officially, not publicly, but in every way that matters. The bond between us. He took a shaky breath. It's why I went half mad searching for you. Why the thought of losing you nearly destroyed me. And why I need you to understand that whatever you choose, to stay, to go, to remember or not remember, I will respect it, even if it tears me apart, mate. The word resonated through my entire being, explained so much. The pull I felt toward him, the way my body seemed to recognize him even when my mind couldn't, the fierce protectiveness that had driven me to stand between him and danger. I don't remember loving you, I whispered. But I think I might be falling in love with you anyway. Is that possible? To fall for the same person twice? The sound he made was half laugh, half sob. He pulled me against his chest, burying his face in my hair, and I felt him shaking. Yes. He breathed against my temple. Yes, it's possible. And God's Elena. You have no idea what it means to hear you say that. We stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the rest of the world falling away. Then Sasha cleared her throat delicately from across the room. Hate to interrupt, she said, though her expression was fond rather than annoyed. But Rowan needs to drink this and sleep, or those wounds are going to kill him despite all our efforts. And we need to move out at first light if we're going to make the reach before the week's deadline starts counting down. Reluctantly, Rowan released me and accepted the cup Sasha offered. He drank it down without complaint, though his face twisted at the taste. Within minutes, his eyes were growing heavy. "Stay," he murmured, catching my hand again. "Please. I need to know you're close." I settled beside him, his hand still clasping mine, and watched as sleep finally claimed him. The fever would break, or it wouldn't. All we could do now was wait and hope. Sasha brought me a blanket and a knowing look. "He's not usually this vulnerable," she said quietly. "Not in front of anyone. The fact that he let you see him like this, let you help him, that tells you everything you need to know about what you mean to him. Tell me about us," I said. "About how we met, what we were like together, please. I need to know." Sasha settled into a chair across from me, her expression softening with memory. "You arrived at the Reach 8 months ago. Like Rowan said, you'd been through hell. We could all see it, though you never talked about the details. Rowan gave you sanctuary, asked no questions, demanded nothing in return. That alone was unusual. He's a good alpha, fair and just, but he's not typically soft. Yet with you, from the very first day, he was gentle." She paused, smiling slightly. "You didn't make it easy on him, though. You were terrified, traumatized, barely able to look anyone in the eye. But you were also stubborn as hell, refused special treatment, insisted on earning your keep. Started working in the archives, organizing centuries of pack records. Turned out you had a gift for it, for finding patterns and connections no one else had seen. That's how I learned about the council corruption, I guessed. Partially. But mostly you learned by listening, by being quiet and observant while others talked around you. You became invaluable to Rowan, not just as an archivist, but as an advisor. He trusted your insights, your perspective as someone outside pack politics." Sasha's expression grew warmer. "And somewhere along the way, trust became friendship. Friendship became something more. We all saw it happening, watched you two dance around each other for months. But we never..." I gestured vaguely, unsure how to phrase it. "Made it official? No. Rowan was afraid of pressuring you, of making you feel like you owed him anything. And you were afraid of, well, everything. Your past, your future, the feelings themselves. So you both just existed in this state of mutual longing and careful restraint." She shook her head. It was painful to watch, honestly. Everyone in the Reach was waiting for one of you to finally break and admit what was obvious to everyone else. And then I decided to testify to the council. "You volunteered," Sasha corrected. "Against Rowan's wishes. He wanted to find another way, didn't want to put you in danger, but you insisted. Said it was the right thing to do, that you couldn't hide forever. He argued with you for days, but in the end, he couldn't deny you your choice. So he did the next best thing, gave you the strongest protection he could. Sent his best guards, gave you that brooch as a symbol of his claim on you." I looked down at Rowan's sleeping face, at the lines of pain and worry even unconsciousness couldn't fully erase. He'd let me go, let me make my own choice, even knowing it might cost him everything. "I think," I said slowly, "that whoever I was before, she was very lucky to have someone like him. And whoever I'm becoming, I want to be worthy of that." "You already are," Sasha said simply. "Memory or no memory, you're still you. Still the woman brave enough to step between an alpha and a counselor to prevent bloodshed. Still the woman who stayed to tend wounds instead of running when twisted ones attacked. Rowan sees that. We all do." Through the night, I kept watch over Rowan, monitoring his fever, changing his bandages when they soaked through. Toward dawn, the fever finally broke, his skin cooling to a more normal temperature, his breathing evening out into true rest rather than fevered unconsciousness. When the first light of morning crept through the way station windows, he opened his eyes and found me still sitting beside him. "You stayed," he said, his voice rough but stronger. "I promised I would," I replied. "And I keep my promises, apparently, even if I don't remember making them." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face, and I felt my breath catch at the beauty of it. "Then let's get you home," he said. "Let's get you back to the Northern Reach, and see if we can't find the rest of those memories. We have a week to make a miracle happen." I helped him sit up, let him lean on me more than pride would normally allow. Outside, I could hear the others breaking camp, preparing for the final leg of our journey. "Rowan," I said as we prepared to leave, "whatever I remember or don't remember, whatever I end up testifying, I want you to know that this, right now, this feeling between us, it's real. It's mine. No one can take it away or tell me it's false." He kissed my forehead, gentle and reverent. "That's all I need," he whispered. "That's more than I dared to hope for." We rode north toward the northern reach, toward answers and mysteries, toward a future neither of us could predict. Behind us, I knew, Thorne's observers were already moving into position, watching, waiting for any misstep. The clock was ticking. We had 7 days. The northern reach revealed itself gradually as we crested the final ridge, a sprawling valley cradled between mountains, their peaks already white with early snow. At the valley's heart lay Mirror Lake, just as Rowan had described it, its surface so clear and still, it perfectly reflected the sky above. And surrounding the lake, built into the hillsides and nestled among ancient pines, was a community that looked less like a settlement and more like something grown organically from the land itself. "Home," Rowan said softly beside me, and I heard the relief in his voice. As we descended into the valley, people began emerging from buildings. Dozens of them, then what seemed like hundreds, gathering along the path. Word of our approach must have spread quickly. I expected wariness, maybe even hostility toward the human woman who'd brought trouble to their doorstep. Instead, I saw faces lit with joy, heard voices calling out Rowan's name, and saw tears on more than a few cheeks. An older woman broke from the crowd, running despite her age, and Rowan barely had time to dismount before she threw her arms around him. "You reckless fool," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We heard about the attack, heard you'd gone tearing off into the wildlands. Do you have any idea how worried we've been?" "I'm sorry, Margaret," Rowan said, returning her embrace. "But I couldn't leave her out there." Margaret pulled back, and her eyes found me. They were kind eyes, warm brown and crinkled at the corners from years of smiling. "Elena," she breathed. "Oh, child, we thought we'd lost you." She came to help me down from my horse, and the moment my feet touched the ground, she pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home. I didn't know this woman, couldn't remember her, but my body seemed to recognize the comfort of her embrace. "I'm sorry," I said, pulling back to look at her. I can't remember you." "I know, dear." "Rowan sent word ahead about your injury." Margaret cupped my face in her weathered hands. "I'm Margaret, the Reach's head healer. You and I spent many evenings together in my workshop, learning about herbs and remedies. You have a gift for healing, even if you don't remember it right now." Over the next hours, I was introduced and reintroduced to what felt like the entire population of the Reach. Each person had a story about me, a memory they wanted to share. The blacksmith whose daughter I'd tutored in reading, the baker who'd taught me to make the honey cakes Rowan loved, the children who'd followed me around the archives, fascinated by the old stories I'd translate for them. I was overwhelmed by it all, by the evidence of a life I'd lived here, connections I'd forged, a place I'd apparently belonged. And through it all, Rowan stayed close, a steady presence, ready to step in if I became too overwhelmed, but letting me navigate these reunions at my own pace. Margaret insisted on examining both of us immediately, clucking disapprovingly over Rowan's wounds and my head injury. Her workshop was exactly as she described it must have been, shelves lined with jars and bottles, dried herbs hanging from the rafters, the air thick with the scent of medicines and growing things. "The poison is purged," she announced after examining Rowan's injuries. "Another day, and it might have been a different story, but you're a stubborn beast. You'll heal." She turned to me, her expression growing more serious. "Your wound is healing well physically, but the mind is a more delicate thing. Memory loss from trauma can resolve in hours or it can last years. There's no way to know. But there might be ways to help it along?" I asked hopefully. "Perhaps. Familiar places, familiar faces, familiar routines. These things can sometimes trigger recall. And there are herbs that might help, though they're not without risk. She paused, studying me carefully. The question is, Elena, do you want to remember? Sometimes our minds hide things from us for a reason, to protect us from pain we're not ready to face. The question caught me off guard. Did I want to remember? The past few days had shown me glimpses of who I might have been, and not all of it had been comfortable. The hints about my past trauma, the dangerous political games I'd apparently been playing, the testifying that had nearly cost me my life. But then I looked at Rowan, saw him watching me with those intense amber eyes, and I knew the answer. Yes, I said. I want to remember. All of it, even the painful parts. Because I can't move forward if I don't know where I've been. Margaret nodded approvingly, spoken like the Elena I know. Very well. I'll prepare a tea. It will help relax the mind's defenses, make it easier for memories to surface. But you should rest first. Regain your strength. The next few days will be challenging enough without exhausting yourself further. Rowan took me to what had apparently been my quarters. A small cottage on the edge of the lake, simple but comfortable. The moment I stepped inside, something shifted in my chest. This place felt right in a way the village had not. In a way even Rowan's presence had not quite managed. This had been mine. I moved through the room slowly, touching things, trying to feel some spark of recognition. Books lined the shelves, their spines worn from repeated reading. A desk sat by the window overlooking the lake. Papers still scattered across its surface covered in handwriting I somehow knew was mine, even if I couldn't remember writing the words. And on the small table beside the bed, a sketch, rough but skilled, capturing Rowan's profile as he looked out over the lake. I drew this, I said, picking it up carefully. Rowan nodded, a flush creeping up his neck. You often sketched while we talked. Said it helped you think. I didn't know you'd kept that one. I studied the drawing, the obvious care that had gone into capturing not just his features, but the expression on his face. Pensive, lonely, beautiful. I think I loved you, I said quietly. Even then, before whatever happened between us. I loved you and I was trying to capture it because I was afraid to say it aloud. He crossed to me in 3 strides, pulling me against him with a desperation that spoke of too many days, fearing he'd never hold me again. I love you, he said fiercely. I have loved you from the moment you first looked at me without fear, saw past the alpha to the man beneath. And I will love you whether your memories return or not, whether you choose to stay or go, whether... I kissed him, cutting off his words, pouring into that kiss everything I couldn't yet say, everything I was only beginning to understand. He responded with equal intensity, his hands tangling in my hair, his mouth moving against mine with a hunger that was 8 months in the making. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. We have 6 days left, he said. 6 days before the council comes for your testimony. Whatever happens, whatever you remember or don't remember, I want you to know. You owe me nothing. Not gratitude, not loyalty, not love. If your memories return and you realize you want a different life, want to leave this place, I will let you go. And if I want to stay? I asked. Then I will spend every day of the rest of my life grateful for the second chance. Over the following days, I threw myself into reclaiming my lost life. Margaret gave me her memory tea each morning, and I spent my days retracing the steps of who I'd been. I worked in the archives, my hands finding familiar rhythms as I organized documents. I walked the paths around the lake, my feet knowing the way even when my mind didn't. I sat with the people who'd known me, listening to their stories, building a picture of Elena Winters from the outside in. And slowly, painfully, memories began to surface. They came in fragments at first. A conversation with Margaret about Wolfsbane and its properties. The feeling of Rowan's hand in mine as we walked beside the lake. The day I'd finally laughed freely. The sound startling everyone, including myself. Each memory was precious, a piece of myself recovered. But the harder memories came too. On the 4th night, I woke screaming from a nightmare that wasn't a nightmare at all, but a memory. Rowan was there instantly, gathering me against his chest as I shook and sobbed. "I remember why I came here," I gasped out. "I remember what I was running from." "You don't have to tell me," Rowan said, his hand stroking my hair. "Not if you're not ready, but I needed to say it, needed to let it out. I was engaged. To a man my father chose, a business arrangement. He seemed kind at first, charming. But after the engagement was announced, he changed. Became possessive, controlling, and then violent. My fingers unconsciously went to my ribs, where scars I'd noticed but not understood suddenly made terrible sense. I tried to break the engagement, but my father refused, said I was being dramatic, that I needed to learn my place, so I ran. Took what little I could carry and just ran. "And found your way here," Rowan finished softly. "You didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations or proof. Just gave me sanctuary, gave me safety." I looked up at him, seeing him clearly for the first time through the lens of recovered memory. "You gave me my life back." "You gave me something too," Rowan said. "Purpose beyond duty, hope that I could be more than just an alpha, that I could be a man worthy of being loved for himself rather than his position." More memories came flooding back over the next days. The first time Rowan had smiled at me, really smiled, and how it had stolen my breath. The night I'd found him alone by the lake, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders, and I'd simply sat beside him in silent companionship. The moment I'd realized I was in love with him and the terror that had come with it. The fear that I was trading one trap for another. But most importantly, I remembered the decision to testify. I'd uncovered evidence of council corruption in the archives, proof that certain councilors were profiting from territorial disputes, deliberately stoking conflicts to increase their own power. Evidence that some of those same councilors had connections to the man I'd fled from, that my arrival in the Northern Reach had been noted and reported. I'd known testifying would paint a target on my back. But I'd also known that staying silent meant watching Rowan and his people suffer for political games they had no part in. So I'd chosen to speak, chosen to fight, even knowing the cost. On the 6th morning, I woke with full recall, every memory restored, every piece of myself recovered. I found Rowan already awake, sitting by the lake, watching the sunrise paint the water gold and pink. "I remember," I said, settling beside him. "Everything." He turned to look at me, and I saw hope and fear warring in his expression. "Everything? Why I came here, why I stayed, why I love you." I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. "And why I have to testify tomorrow, even knowing what it might cost us." "Elena." "I'm not running anymore," I said firmly. "Not from my past, not from danger, not from the consequences of doing what's right. You taught me that. You showed me that strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about choosing to act despite the fear." Rowan pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I wish I could protect you from all of it," he said roughly. "I wish I could keep you safe here forever, away from the council and their politics and all the people who want to use you or hurt you. But that wouldn't really be safety," I said. "That would be another kind of prison. I need to do this, Rowan. For me, for us, for everyone who deserves better than a corrupt council making decisions that affect their lives." He nodded against my hair, and I felt the tremor run through him. "Then I'll be beside you, every step of the way, no matter what happens." We spent that final day together, memorizing each other, storing up moments against whatever the future might bring. We walked the paths around the lake, visited every place that held meaning for us. That evening, Margaret performed a traditional mating ceremony in front of the entire Reach, a simple ritual of vows and promises, witnessed by the pack, binding us together in the eyes of wolf law, if not yet human law. As the sun set and the celebration continued around us, Rowan drew me aside to the lake's edge, to the place where we'd spent so many quiet hours together. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, "this is real. We are real. No council, no corruption, no threat can take that away from us." "I know," I said, and I did. The weeks of lost memory had taught me that some things transcend memory, transcend fear. What I felt for this man was written in my bones, in my soul. Whether I remembered it or not, it would always be true. The next morning, Counselor Thorne arrived with her delegation exactly at dawn, precisely as the week had stipulated. But this time, I walked out to meet her not as a confused, frightened woman with no memory, but as Elena Winters, archivist, survivor, and mate to the Alpha of the Northern Reach. "Counselor," I said calmly, "I'm ready to provide my testimony." Thorne's eyes narrowed, taking in my changed demeanor, the confidence in my posture. "Your memory has returned, completely, and I have quite a lot to say to the council." I met her gaze steadily, including evidence of corruption, embezzlement, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Evidence that I've spent the last 6 days verifying and documenting with help from the Northern Reach's archives. For the first time, I saw genuine alarm flicker across Thorne's face. "I think you're making a serious mistake, Miss Winters. Accusations against council members are taken very seriously. If you cannot prove—" "I can prove it," I interrupted. "Every allegation, every connection, every payment. It's all documented, all verified, and it all leads back to 3 specific counselors." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in, one of whom is standing in front of me right now. The clearing went absolutely silent. Thorne's hand moved toward her weapon, but before she could draw it, Rowan's entire pack materialized from the trees. Dozens of wolves in both human and beast form, surrounding the council delegation. "I'd reconsider that," Rowan said mildly. "You're outnumbered, outmatched, and the evidence Elena has compiled is already on its way to every other member of the council via trusted messengers. Drawing a weapon on a witness now would only confirm your guilt." Thorne's face went through a series of expressions: rage, calculation, and finally, grudging defeat. She lowered her hand from her weapon. "This isn't over," she said coldly. "No," I agreed. "It's just beginning. The council will hear my testimony, all of it, and then they'll have a choice to make about what kind of institution they want to be, one that serves justice or one that serves corruption." Thorne and her delegation left under guard, escorted by Rowan's most trusted warriors to ensure they caused no trouble on the journey. I watched them go, feeling not triumph but simple relief. It was done. The truth was out. "You know this means war," Sasha said, coming to stand beside me. "Political war at minimum. The counselors you've implicated won't go down quietly." "I know," I said, "but at least it will be an honest war, fought in the light, rather than through shadows and manipulation." Rowan wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my head. "Together," he said simply. "Whatever comes, we face it together." I leaned back into his embrace, looking out over the lake, over the reach that had become my home, at the people who had become my family. I'd lost my memory and found it again. I'd lost myself and been rebuilt stronger. I'd faced my fears and survived. And I'd found love, real, honest, powerful love, with a man who saw me not as property or a pawn, but as a partner, an equal. "Together," I agreed, turning in his arms to kiss him. Always together. In the weeks that followed, my testimony shook the council to its foundations. 3 counselors were removed from power, their corruption exposed and punished. New leadership emerged, younger and more idealistic, committed to the principles the council was supposed to uphold. It wasn't perfect. Change never was. But it was progress. Rowan and I were formally mated in both wolf and human ceremonies, our bond recognized across all territories. And while there were still those who whispered about the human woman who'd captured an alpha's heart, who'd challenged the council and survived, I no longer feared their whispers. I'd found my strength not in spite of my humanity, but because of it. Compassion, determination, the courage to stand for what was right, even when the cost was high. 6 months after the testimony, on the first warm day of spring, I sat by Mirror Lake with a book in my lap, feeling the sun on my face and the gentle movement of new life within me. Rowan's child, growing strong and healthy, a symbol of our future. Rowan emerged from the trees, moving to sit beside me, his hand automatically going to rest on the small swell of my belly. "What are you reading?" he asked. I showed him the journal Vera had given me. now filled with entries documenting everything that had happened since the carriage accident. "Our story," I said. From the moment I woke up, not knowing my own name, to now, I thought, someday, when our child is old enough to understand, they should know it. Know that their mother was once lost and afraid, but found her way home, and their father was a fool who almost waited too long to claim what his heart had known from the start," Rowan added, pressing a kiss to my temple. I laughed, closing the journal and setting it aside. We found each other. That's what matters. Everything else, the danger, the politics, the challenges, we face them together, and we'll keep facing them whatever comes. "Together," Rowan agreed, pulling me close. "Always together." As the sun climbed higher and the lake sparkled like a mirror reflecting all the hope and promise of our future, I realized that memory loss had been a gift in its own strange way. It had forced me to rediscover who I was, to rebuild myself from the foundation up, and in doing so, I'd become stronger than I ever could have been otherwise. I was Elena Winters, mate to an alpha, survivor of trauma and violence, challenger of corruption, and soon-to-be mother. I was all of these things and more, a woman who had found her pack, her purpose, and her peace. And I was finally completely home.